Hello. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to Earth Science and the 5 areas that we are going to encompass in this course. Okay, so the 5 areas that will be included in this course are astronomy, meteorology, geology, oceanography, and environmental science. And we'll talk more about each of these, but I wanted to introduce them first. So astronomy. Astronomy includes the study of objects beyond Earth's atmosphere. We're talking about the moon, we're talking about the sun, we're talking about the planets, the universe, the stars, galaxies, black holes. This is astronomy. Next, we'll talk about meteorology. Meteorology includes the study of forces and processes that cause the atmosphere to change and to produce weather. There's a multitude of variables involved when it comes to the weather, and so predicting the weather comes down to utilizing statistical models and mathematical models in order to make predictions based on historical data. And this is one of the reasons why the weather can be difficult, if not impossible, to predict, because there's so many variables that influence the weather. And when you're just looking at historical data, trying to find statistical similarities between what's happened in the past and what is likely to happen tomorrow, in 3 hours, in a week, it makes it very difficult to anticipate seemingly infinitely many variables. That is called meteorology. Next up, we have geology. Geology is the study of materials that make up Earth, the processes that form and change these materials, and the history of the planet and its life forms. So looking at these different phrases here in this definition, you should be able to pick out a few things. Okay, I like this last phrase. When I was younger, I loved the idea of being a paleontologist. The history of the planet and its life forms. We can actually dig and find fossils, and fossils include the history of the planet and its life forms. You can find fossilized, mineralized remains, almost like photocopies of plants and animals. We can also study the materials that make up Earth and the processes that create and change those materials. And what we're talking about here is sediments. We can find sediments, and sediments can accumulate, and under time and pressure, those sediments can change and they can turn into rocks. And those rocks that form from those sediments could metamorphosize under great pressure and temperature into other materials, such as metamorphic rocks. All these are included in the field of geology. Next up, we have oceanography. Oceanography is the study of the Earth's oceans and how those oceans move and interact. And then we have environmental science. And environmental science is broad and includes the study of the interactions of different organisms and how those organisms interact with their surroundings. You can even include ideas from junior high science, where you learn about consumers and producers and how producers they produce food using the sun, and then the primary consumers consume the producers, and then there's always something that eats the primary consumer, like a secondary consumer, and they interact and change their environment. Humans interact with their environment. Humans change their environment. Many animals have great influence on their surroundings. And this web of interactions is all included in environmental science. So Earth has these 4 systems, or interactions on Earth can be categorized within these 4 systems. We have the geosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere. All right, notice that these 4 words have something in common. They all have the word sphere. That's a reference to Earth, or this particular sphere that we happen to be on. We have the geosphere, which is basically talking about the hardscape. We have the atmosphere that's talking about the gas above the geosphere. We're talking about the hydrosphere, which includes water in its many forms. Gas, the form of water, the liquid form of water, solid form of water, and how they exist within these other systems. And then, of course, the biosphere, which is the living stuff. stuff that's alive. So first up, the geosphere. The geosphere is everything from the surface of the Earth down to the center of the Earth, the hardscapes. Next up, the atmosphere. The atmosphere includes the blanket of gases that surrounds our planet. Our particular atmosphere is very friendly for life. Not all planets, in fact, most planets do not have a hospitable atmosphere for life as we know it. Hydrosphere. So all of the water on Earth, including the water in the atmosphere, the frozen water in the cryosphere, all the liquid water, like I said, these are all part of the hydrosphere. The permanently frozen water is commonly called either permafrost or cryosphere, and the cryosphere is the water that just basically doesn't melt. And I'm not saying it's not capable of melting. What we're saying here is that if we go to the warmest time of the year to where this frozen water is, that's the frozen water that's still frozen during that time. And then obviously as the temperature starts dropping again, more and more frozen water starts remaining. And then of course the biosphere. So all organisms on Earth, as well as their environments, are included in the biosphere. So it's not just organisms on Earth. We're also talking about what they live in. You could think of this as biomes. You have a collection of biomes that make up the biosphere. And a lot of times certain organisms, certain plants, certain animals will be attracted to certain biomes. When you put all those biomes into one large collection, it's called the biosphere. All right, and so I mentioned that these all interact with each other. Here's an example of interactions between all of these different Earth systems. Okay, when we talk about the water cycle, we're thinking about water, and water moves between these different systems in this cycle. For example, we have the hydrosphere, which is the water on Earth. In this case, this drawing is referencing the surface water. But just so you know, technically all water on Earth is considered hydrosphere. Even when it's in the atmosphere, even when it's in the groundwater, it's all part of the hydrosphere. But anyway, in this particular drawing, they say that the hydrosphere enters the atmosphere. What they mean is the surface water enters the atmosphere, falls to the biosphere, soaks into the geosphere, and returns to the hydrosphere, which includes the atmosphere. Or it returns to the atmosphere, which is part of the hydrosphere. Okay, so there's this cycle. The water goes from the ground up into the atmosphere, recondenses down, drops back down into where everything is living, or in other words, the biosphere. It interacts with the geosphere. When it infiltrates the ground, it goes into the ground. Okay, and so water is able to move in this cycle through Earth's different systems. We can utilize technology to make life safer and also to make life easier. We use technology not only in science but in everyday life. So we can actually exploit our environment to our advantage. So in class, we talked about how geothermal energy is an example of how we can exploit our environment. Instead of burning fossil fuels, we can find ways to extract energy from our environment, from the sun, from wind, from geothermal, and we talked about some of those in class. So just be aware that we can utilize technology. We can make observations about our environment, and using those observations, we can create technologies to exploit our environment to our advantage. Okay, vocabulary terms that you need to know for this particular first section of the first chapter include astronomy, meteorology, geology, oceanography, environmental science, and then of course the systems, geosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, biosphere. Make sure you've defined those in your notebooks. Like I said, your handwritten notes are allowed on the test. Remember, it's open handwritten notes only. The handouts I give you in class for you to complete, those are for your own good, but those are not, and for your grade of course, but those aren't for using on your test. If there's anything on those that you like, make sure you copy those handwritten into your notebooks. And like I said, that's free game on the test. You can use your own handwritten notes. You can't use your neighbor's handwritten notes. Make sure you have these terms down. I won't always ask you the vocabulary words straight away. I might ask you questions that require a knowledge of what those vocabulary words mean in order to answer them. but you'll definitely want to at least know these vocabulary terms so that you'll be able to answer the questions that I have for you on your test. All right, if you have any questions about this PowerPoint, make sure you leave me a question, email me, leave me a comment so that I can answer your question, and we can talk about it further in class. Thanks for watching.